All right, hello everyone. This is Kristen Nisbet-White from the Career Development Center. I'm so glad to have you all with us today. We are lucky to have staff from the Illinois House of Representatives with us. I'm going to turn it over to Sally McDaniel-Smith, who is going to introduce the panelists and give us an overview of what's about to happen today.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for coming today. My name, as Kristen said, is Sally McDaniel-Smith. I'm the Human Resources Generalist over at the Illinois House of Representatives, and we are looking forward to welcoming today our presenters from the Research and Appropriations Unit. Mark Jarmer has been the Director of Research and Appropriations since 2018. Madeline McCune and Jelani Sadiq have served as research analysts since 2017 and 2018. Kristen, if you want to show them that slide, we've got their mugshots here. They're going to talk to you a little bit later today. I will be very brief. Our agenda today is to provide you with an understanding of the various opportunities within the Illinois House of Representatives. First, I will walk you through a very brief overview of the General Assembly and of the Office of the Speaker, and then I will get out of the way and let you have a chance to hear from these wonderful staff members. So the Illinois General Assembly is a bicameral legislature. Kristen, you can skip forward 2 slides and we'll be talking about both the Senate and the House, which is what we mean when we say a bicameral legislature. So the Senate currently has 59 districts. 40 of those are represented by Democrats and 19 are represented by Republicans. The House has 118 districts. 74 of those are held by Democrats and 44 are held by Republicans. In Illinois, our House districts are nested within our Senate districts. There are 2 House districts in each Senate district. House members are elected every 2 years, and Senate members are elected on 2 or 4-year terms. These districts are all redrawn every 10 years following the decennial census. This will take place next year. The legislature has a few key responsibilities. The bulk of the work of the legislature revolves around the consideration of bills and of other legislative measures. The legislature also approves the state budget and has the ability to raise or lower taxes and set levels of state spending. The General Assembly may also consider amendments to either federal or state constitution. The Senate approves gubernatorial appointments. The House has the power of impeachment. While it's rare, it was used as recently as 2009 in the case of the impeachment of Governor Rod Blagojevich. Each General Assembly begins in January of an odd-numbered year and lasts for 2 years. We are currently in the 101st General Assembly, and the 102nd General Assembly will be inaugurated in January of next year. In general, we are actively in session January through May 31st each year, and we return for 2 weeks in the fall. That fall session, we call it veto session, as it's used primarily to consider vetoes issued by the governor on legislation passed during the spring session. We're here to talk to you today about opportunities within the Office of the Speaker. The Speaker of the Illinois House of Representatives is Michael J. Madigan. He's the longest serving Speaker of the House in United States history, having been the Speaker since 1983, with the exception of 2 years in the 1990s. Of course, we can't possibly tell you all the ways you might plug into the office in just 1 hour. So today we're going to focus on the 3 primary substantive partisan staff units. Please also be aware that the Office of the Speaker is responsible for the operations of the Office of the Clerk, which is a bipartisan office of approximately 100 staff members that provides administrative support and keeps the wheels of the House running smoothly. If you're interested in learning more about opportunities within the Office of the Clerk, please reach out to me anytime. I'll be happy to talk to you about those. Today, within the House Democrat staff, there are around 100 employees at any given time in various roles. Relevant to our discussion today are the 3 major substantive units that assist the Democrat members of the House in serving their constituencies effectively. The Research and Appropriations Unit is here with us today, so I will let them tell you all about themselves shortly. The Issues Development Unit provides support directly to members. So each issues staffer is assigned to specific members and provides those members with assistance with strategic communications, planning, analysis of issues that may impact their constituencies, and helps to address constituent concerns within each district. The Technical Review Unit is a staff of mostly contractual attorneys that provides legal assistance, ethics guidance, serves as parliamentarians for the House and for House committees, and prepares, analyzes, and assists with negotiation of legislation. The Research and Technical Review Units often work on similar tasks, often together, but they tend to be in different subject areas, and they'll get into that in a little bit. Now I'm going to hand it over to Mark Jarmer, Director of the Research and Appropriations Unit, who will talk more about the role of a research analyst.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited about the opportunity to talk to you because I remember very well what it was like to be in college and start thinking about what comes after. And then I have about 1,500 kids. So each of them are in different spaces of their academic development, but one's in law school and is starting to think about what comes after the third year. So exciting to speak with you. The first thing that I would point out is that there's not one trajectory to come to work as a legislative analyst or in the General Assembly. We're all familiar with that medieval Latin phrase about all roads leading to Rome. And it's a very applicable metaphor here because my experience has been the path to legislative work has been very varied among the different staff that work on the floor. One of the most common ways to have an entree into legislative work is the ILSIP program, our internship program that is run through UIS, with which most of you are probably familiar. That is a primary avenue or aqueduct to come to us. But there are also people that just come in and do a cold call. That's actually how I got employed here. And so there's not one specific way to become a member of staff here. And I think that bears keeping in mind. If you find yourself not doing the ILSIP internship, you might ask yourself, well, is the door closed? The answer is no. So there are many avenues. For me, my personal experience, when I was at Arizona State University in the 90s, I was walking on the quad and saw a flyer for a program like the Illinois ILSIP program in Arizona. And so it was a competitive program. You had to go through, several rounds of interviews, but I did that. And thereafter, I was assigned to the Environment Committee for the Arizona Senate. And I really loved doing the work. I was always on a track for law school. I had never considered working in the legislature, but after staffing environment, I really got the bug. And every state does it differently. In Arizona, the staff's primary responsibility is to go to committee, and then we presented all the bills. So advocates did not come up to the podium and testify normally. It was the staff presenting the bill to the committee and answering their questions. So a little bit different than how we do it here. But I took that opportunity, and after doing it, went to work for the Department of Environmental Quality, a state agency like our EPA. And I was their lobbyist for a while. I was partnered with another person, and we lobbied the General Assembly for the agency. And I sojourned from that into being kind of an assistant to the director. I wrote his speeches. So those experiences really gave me the foundation to my present employment here. And after 9/11, I mentioned at the top of this slide that I kind of did a cold call with the director at the time, John Lauder. My children were living in Danville, and I was wanting to be closer to them. And so just came up here on the fifth floor, spoke to the director, and about a month later, he called me with a job opportunity. So please keep in mind, networking is very important. The ILSIP program is an excellent way, but not the only avenue. Okay, just to give you a little bit about my experiences here. I arrived in 2008. At the time that I came to work here, I was told the average tenure for an analyst was around 3 years. That will vary with the economy. Of course, we have more longevity in a poor economy. I thought I would stay for a couple of years. This will be my 14th session, and Sally and I are shaking our heads. It's amazing how quickly the time flies when you're working up here. My trajectory was higher education. That's where I started. And some of you may have questions about, well, how do I get into a specific field? What will be my area of expertise if I were to work in the assembly? For me, I had been teaching at a community college for about 10 years prior to coming here. And so the director thought that I would be a good fit for higher education. And that's really where I cut my teeth. That was a difficult time because of the impasse with Rauner, but I'm very glad to have had that experience. Jelani, who you'll hear from, currently does higher education for us. JCAR is the Administrative Rules Committee. I point that out to you just because you can work up here and not really understand a whole avenue of this process if you don't understand the administrative rule process. So I found that to be very helpful in just broadening out my experience depth. Consumer protection I found was very interesting. We did everything from keeping farmers markets safe to baby bumper for cribs. So a lot of variation there, but it really taught me, because that's a committee where you really see the public invested in concern, and they appear in the committee often. So I thought that was great. My military experiences, I had been active duty for quite a while, and so I was given the military and vets affairs committees. And I worked on bonding with the PEER, the convention industry up in Chicago, as well as licensing. And licensing was probably my favorite endeavor, working along with the physicians and dentists and real estate agents. Anybody that requires a license goes through our licensure committee, and I really enjoyed working on that. So my real takeaway for you here is, if you are to work on the legislative staff or anywhere for that matter, always volunteer. You know, people will tell you, don't, keep your head down, you know, do your work. I disagree. Get out there and do as many things as you can, volunteer for as many things as you can, because you don't know where that job is going to be post working here. Most people will not look at this as a terminal field. So you want to have the most breadth to your experience as possible, of course. Finally, my chief of staff alerted me about 3 years ago, the current chiefs of, the former chief of staff, to the fact that they were wanting me to transition into the director behind the current director, which was Jess Basham. So for about a year, I helped her on the revenue committee, and I went to a review process downstairs, which is when we walk leadership through all the legislation that gets assigned out to a committee. So you kind of have an entree level understanding of every piece of legislation that moves, and we present that to the leadership team. As I mentioned before, the last several years have been a little tough with the Rauner and now the coronavirus situations, but I could not be happier to work here, and I was appointed the director in 2018. Then finally, I thought it would be helpful for you to know a little bit about why someone would remain here. We talked earlier about 3 to 5 years being a typical tenure, a little longer in a bad economy, et cetera. But I would tell you that I stayed because I love it. It's very rewarding work. If we're being honest, it is grueling from, you know, not so much January to May, our normal session platform, but particularly the latter part of April and May. It's tough. We're here. I've got these guys, Madeline and Jelani, are here, you know, sometimes 18, 20 hours a day. And that's, you know, that's not hyperbole. But what I find to be the most rewarding is the quality of people that you will run up against. Young people, people that are nearing retirement. There is so much to learn from so many people. I've never been around an experience where there were so many, you know, type A, very intelligent folks. So every time you walk into the room, those of us, you know, some of us we did excellent in our educational background. But when you get into the work environment, you may find that you're a pretty small fish in a big bowl. And that can be intimidating at first, but I think it's one of the most rewarding career expansions you could ever have, because it keeps you on your toes. I would say that working on Pinnacle legislation has probably been one of the most rewarding things that I've had the pleasure to do. Sorry about that camera. And it's because you really get to touch base with the constituency of members. So for example, the former chief of staff sent me out to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, when an Illinois battalion was deploying over to the Gulf during the war. And so I got to sit down with soldiers, go through a tea ceremony with them in a mock-up of an Islamic village. It was fascinating. And to be the representative of government, you know, saying farewell to our troops as they deployed was very rewarding. You will have the opportunity working on staff to visit all sorts of agencies and departments that assist constituencies. This visit to ICFDDs that I'm talking about, lockout children, are just heartbreaking stories about what happens to some children as they enter into our mental health world, and how that can maybe not be as rewarding or as successful as we might wish. Working around things like that, sometimes it's hard. I'm not going to lie. I mean, it's difficult to see people suffering, but every once in a while, you get to be a part of something that's instrumental in changing those people's lives. And I can't think of anything more satisfying. Finally, I would say the safety for nurses and the anonymous veterans. Those are two projects that I worked on near to my heart. One, because I'm a veteran, and two, because I'm married to a nurse. So we did a bill a couple of years ago to protect nurses after a violent situation up in Chicagoland. And that felt very good to be a part of. And then I was enabled to go out and find veterans that were, they had no family, they had perished and been cremated, and they were just left in mortuaries. And so I got to be around a bill that helped gather their remains and take them to national cemeteries. And that was fabulous. So the takeaway here is you never know what kind of issue you're going to work around and be empowered to be instrumental in. And that to me is very exciting. There are challenges to this besides the grueling work. You have to be somebody, and Madeline and Jelani will tell you, you come to work at 8:30 and you think you know what your day is going to look like, and you don't. It's going to change with that first phone call from downstairs, or the first emergency that crops up, and then it just gets worse from there. So if you're somebody that likes to know every day, same routine, this is probably not the job for you. This is more a job for people that enjoy, remaining nimble and kind of having to change tacks several times a day to respond to the most egregious situation. One of the biggest challenges that we're going to have in the next several years will deal with the appropriations, of which my staff plays, a primary role. And that's just because of the COVID situation, the economy, and the lack of money. But I would say that to lighten it a little bit, when I talk about the bullet there, working extracurricular activities, you have a lot of opportunities here to do work outside of our offices if you would want to, depending upon what your interests are. And so there's lots to be involved with if you want to make a difference in your community. Finally, I would say I have learned that negotiating with our friends across the aisle has become very satisfying to me. Understanding that despite the common rhetoric on, whatever news channel of your pick, there are a lot of very thoughtful people on both sides of the aisle that are willing to work together to get things done. And that's extremely important. And then finally, I stay here out of a real sense of family and loyalty, primarily to my staff, but to everybody in the speaker's office. You do get a sense, and we try to really engender a spirit of teamwork here up on the floor. Nobody can get this done by themselves. It takes a full staff to get it, and I really enjoy that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to, I believe this is Jelani's slide.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to actually talk about the key traits of an effective research analyst. But basically, another way to look at that is, what does a legislative analyst, what's some of the qualities that they should have in order to be an effective analyst on a day-to-day basis? So one thing that we must do is we must be curious. The ability to go out and research starts from your curiosity level. Sometimes we'll come into the office on any given day, you'll get an email and it says, "What is this?" And it's that spark of curiosity that allows us to go out and kind of create some of the legislation that we put forth, but that comes from a level of creativity as well. Having a broad liberal arts background, some may look at this as, what type of degree did you earn? Well, for me, myself, I actually got my degree in finance. However, I got my minor in urban and regional planning. So it was that minor in urban and regional planning that allowed me to look at cities and counties and towns on a holistic level that allowed me to take that understanding of finance and how money works to now apply it to the legislative scene. And so being able to writing skills are extremely important. Being able to be concise in your messaging is extremely important, but also know who's your audience. Who are you trying to impact? Who are you speaking to? It's something that of course, you garner from your liberal arts background, or just through work or dealing with people on a personal level, which goes to our next one. It's strong interpersonal skills. As much as we spend our time kind of knuckling down and going through legalese and trying to make sure that drafts make sense, before we get to that process, we have to understand how to talk to people. We have to understand how to be able to listen and ask appropriate questions that kind of get us back to the point of the discussion. What are we trying to do? What is the problem at hand? But sometimes people don't always let down their own barriers. And so therefore those strong interpersonal skills, the ability to be able to create networks and truly be able to work those networks for the betterment of your constituents, for the betterment of the caucus, as well as the individual sponsor that you're working with. Time management skills, extremely important. So like my director spoke to earlier, average day starts off about 8:30, but you never know what may happen as you go through the rest of your day. You just won't. And with that understanding, you have to take the time to still get done of some of the smaller things that you may have to do. We have to do bill analysis work. We have to do budgetary work. That's on top of everything that may come down. Representatives, depending on the relationship that you have with them, may ask you to do something. Your director may wake up and say, hey, I got a phone call about this. What is this? So now you're trying to find answers while also competing against a timeline. So one thing about the research and appropriations staff is we allow our staffers the ability to be nimble, to work around a schedule, to create their own schedule per se, schedule their own meetings so that they, one, know how their day should go, but then also is able to take care of some of the other tasks that has come across their desk. I kind of spoke to it earlier, but I'll just add on being able to listen. Listening is extremely important. Sometimes we'll just have meetings where staffers doesn't say anything. We just listen, we take notes, we're very diligent. We ensure that everyone is being heard appropriately, and that only is done when you're able to be an active listener, a participating listener. Use of research tools. So NCSL, which is the National Conference of State Legislators, they offer a plethora of different research tools that you can utilize. But these tools are not just NCSL. That can also be other staffers. That can also be agencies that we work with, lobbying groups and interest groups that we work with. We try to pull together a story. We try to figure out how do you go from point A to point B. And sometimes you may have to reach out to different organizations like the NCSL, or sometimes you can go to a previous staffer, or you can go to the director, or you can go to an agency. But being able to use those resources, understand where they are located, and then able to find the answers that you need in an appropriate amount of time. Being able to use various different analytical skills, from listening to being able to use Microsoft Word and Excel. Some of these very more or less basic skills for general working experience is extremely necessary in a legislative process because time is always against us, right? So we're always kind of beat the clock. And so being able to know how to use these tools efficiently is important. And something, I don't want to read through all of them, but I thought those were extremely important. But I do want to touch these last three things. So superb writing clarity. As I spoke to earlier, the ability to write correctly, grammatically, concise, as well as clearly is extremely important. Knowing who your audience is. If you're writing a memo for your director, or are you writing a memo for a member? Are you trying to break down this 50-page bill within 2 pages? That can only be done when you are concise, when you are clear, and you're straight to your message and to your point. And then the next one is your willingness to confess ignorance. One thing that my director taught me as I came in is never be afraid to ask a question. Because the literal last thing you want to do is a member comes to you and say, hey, what do you think about this? Or is this true? Or what's going on there? If you don't have the answer, just say, I don't know, and be willing to go out and find that answer. Going out and giving out bad information just because you don't want to look bad is not a quality of an effective staffer, because we find answers, we research, and we come back with the necessary information that we need. And that can only be done when you are willing to say, I don't know. And the last thing is the conviction to speak truth to power. This one is something a lot of people don't quite take as much time into, but it's necessary. So many different issues come across our desk, and things that we have to make sure we think about is our caucus, our members, and the direction that our director gave us. So when things come into your office or people come and talk to you about different things, you have to be willing to stick to that, right? We do represent the Democratic Caucus. There are certain initiatives that the Democratic Caucus has that we help promote. This is the truth. However, some may come to you and say, hey, no, that's not what we're doing. This is what it should be. And that's just not the case. That just can't be what we do. We have to protect the best interests of our caucus. We have to protect the best interests of our members. And this sometimes can only be achieved when you truly speak truth to power. And we'll go to Madeline now.
Hi, everyone. My name is Madeline, and today I'll be speaking with you about the primary responsibilities of research analysts. I will include some examples for each responsibility to expand on these items. So first, we have issues, research, and development. So for example, last May, the General Assembly passed a large omnibus bill dealing with sexual harassment and educator misconduct in schools. Before that legislation was passed, the State Board of Education, education lobbies, and myself sat for months researching, developing, and negotiating this policy, which then leads me to my next responsibility, which would be drafting. So after we did that big negotiating, it was my responsibility to take those recommendations to LRB, which is our nonpartisan attorney bureau, which drafts all the legislation for the General Assembly. And so then I want to talk to you guys a little bit about our analysis part. So an analysis is a lot of what we do day to day. We get assigned bills depending on what subject area we staff. So I staff education, and so it is my responsibility that I read the legislation my director assigns me. Conducting an analysis, I need to know the legislation back and forth, and I need to know who supports the bill, who doesn't support the bill, where the bill came from. Those aspects are really important. And then with writing an analysis, this requires a lot of brevity because essentially you're writing an analysis that could be a 600-page bill for your caucus members who haven't had a chance to review the thousands of bills that are filed each GA. And so it's your responsibility to really look closely at what that legislation does. So my goal, along with my other coworkers, is to provide an analysis that a representative could read and understand without ever having to read the 600-page bill. And so then on to committee work. So this requires a lot of attention to detail. Our responsibilities in a committee include writing a script for the chair, correcting and interrupting the chair when a motion or a parliamentary procedure is incorrect, and then making sure the vote totals are right. One of the big things about committee work is being able to slow down when something happens that you're not sure of and just get the chair to relax and be like, let's sort this out before we go on, because it's easier to fix a problem in committee than to have to go back and do it over again. That's a big thing that I've learned being on staff. And then floor debates. So I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen floor debates. This is when a member debates a bill with all the other members of the GA. So let's say I have a bill that I worked on that was assigned to me, and that bill gets called on the floor. My member is down there presenting the bill and most likely will be engaging in some type of debate about that bill. It's my responsibility to then hustle to the floor, stand behind the member and provide support, and be able to answer most, if not all, the questions that are being thrown at my member, because sometimes they're not going to know all the answers, and that's my responsibility to do that. Subject matter hearings. So I'll give you guys an example. Over the past couple of years, there's been a lot of subject matters that I've scheduled in regard to Chicago Public Schools. And so what a subject matter entails is that, I will schedule panels to come present to my committee, and those panels will be given direction from the committee about what to speak about. And then I'll provide an agenda and information to our members before the committee starts. So I'm pretty much like an intermediate between the public, the panels, and the committee members to make sure that accurate information of the situation that we're discussing is being presented in front of our members. As Mark and Jelani spoke about, we do a lot of appropriations work. So, for example, we start having budget discussions in May. So Jelani and I both staff education. He staffs higher ed and I staff ed. But when we start having those discussions, it's our responsibility to be in the room with the appropriations committee, and we need to know and give an overview of what those budgets look like, what the line items look like, how those line items work. And then we need to, if we don't know the answer, then we need to, communicate we don't, and then bring groups in who do, so that our members can have a better explanation of how that line item or that budget item works, so that they can get the best information when trying to decide a fiscal path for the new year. And then last but not least, special projects. I get these all the time. A lot of special projects will stem from bill assignments. So for example, there was this one time I got a bill that would require all schools to hold spelling bees. And then it would create a pathway for those students who won these spelling bees to go to the National Spelling Bee Championship. I did not know a lot about the National Spelling Bee. I have heard of it and seen it. I'm sure like most of you have, but now there's an internal document that explains the National Spelling Bee in a lot of detail. So if anybody's interested in knowing about that, we can pull that for reference. But that's a little bit about the primary responsibilities of a research analyst, and I'd like to turn it back over to Mark for the next slide.
Yeah, so I had intended to be to wow you with my technological prowess and play a small clip of the song Games People Play. I'm going to have to sing it because we don't want to copyright infringe. So where do we go from here? If you were thinking about, when I was teaching, most of my students would get to a point where they were about to graduate and they wonder, okay, this is great. I have a diploma, now what? So what would you do with experience here at the legislature? The biggest thing that I would tell you is, unlike I think a lot of job opportunities, maybe with the exception of the military, at a very young age, you would be given responsibility over a huge amount of money. So for example, Madeline and Jelani each have budgets well over $1 billion. What's your total budget, Maddie, with OSF and general revenue?
About $13 billion.
So $13 billion. Jelani runs the approach for all the universities. So we're talking about millions and millions of dollars. You have the advantage of being instrumental and a person in the room that will not only provide input, but can help shape policy around huge appropriations. Very, very important critical work that can have influence on our state for years to come, and all at a very young age. So how do you take that opportunity after the fact and parlay it into something for a career? The first thing that you could do is you could remain on staff, as I have done and many of my friends have done. Professional staffing opportunities mean just that. There's a small cadre of staff that stay year after year, and they really form the collective memory of the legislative staff process. I think we're important in that regard because, we live in a world of great ideas, but some of us have seen that great idea before and it didn't work so well. And so that institutional knowledge, I think, is really important. And those people that I have up there listed as bullets underneath professional staff opportunities are just those that I really admire that work around me. You could also use your experience here to become an in-house legislative liaison. And what I mean by that is, at a state agency, you are actually an employee of that agency, but you represent that agency to the legislature and to legislators. You could become a contract lobbyist or a contract lobster and put your own shingle out. Do you have to have a law degree? No. Does it help? Probably. But you could go out on your own. And some of my friends without law degrees have done just that thing and do quite well for themselves. I myself may want to go back to teaching when this is all done. I'm tier 1, so but when I retire, I think teaching at a community college or at a UIS, some government classes, I think would be very rewarding. And I think I would have a novel point of view to bring into that classroom. You could also be a consultant for the legislative process, not really a hands-on lobbyist, but someone to whom others might turn for advice on what would be the best method to advance this bill. Should I start it in the Senate? What kind of sponsor should I have? How much should I give in compromising on the policies inherent in that proposal? And those folks tend to do quite well also. Then finally, besides the alternative that I left off here that you would just think, you know what, I'm going to go a completely different direction and go work at Payless Shoes, which is fine, respectable work. You could take your experiences from here and go work in another branch of government. You could go work for the governor's office or in one of his or her state agencies, or you could work in city, local, county government. I think the big takeaway from this are two things. Number one, the breadth of knowledge and information you're going to learn working as a legislative staff member is almost unparalleled. And number two, it really is a wide open career field after the fact. It just depends on what you like, where you see your strengths are, where you could take this experience afterward. And now I think I turn it back to, does this go to Jelani?
Yeah, I'll pick it up from here. So throughout our discussion today, we kind of been alluding to this topic already, but I'll just touch up on a few things. So an average day, generally we work Monday through Friday. However, in April, May, when things get a lot more heavy, we start dealing with the budget a lot more. Sometimes we are expected to be in the office on weekends. There has been, times, not this past session due to COVID, but the one previously where, we will have to come in on a Saturday or a Sunday for a few hours to deal with some issues, get them done, and then we'll get out of there for the rest of the time. However, although when we're not in session, which is the majority of the year outside of the spring anyway, and veto session, we are expected to work from 8:30 to 4:30 that Monday through Friday. Working conditions, we actually work in the Capitol on the 5th floor on the House side. And if I have to speak to our office environment, I will say it's very collaborative. We, as a staff, work from a team perspective. Literally everything we do in some way or form intertwines with someone else's. And a lot of times we have to work in groups together to get things done. We have to go to other committees to see what's going on. We have to deal with different type of members. And sometimes having someone there to help you along is always important. Actually, when I first joined staff, Madeline was my person to kind of help me know where this is, or go talk to that person, or here's a contact for you. So we truly do embody the idea of teamwork. No one is more important than the other, as long as we get the job done. However, with that being said, we don't typically have a normal day. I would say that for the most normal days we have is when everything is going up in smoke. I think that's the most normal, only because you just never know. And I think that's why I love the job so much, is because no day is normal. Every day comes with something new. And sometimes we say that and people don't believe us, but there was times I can remember where in the morning I came in with, okay, I just got 2 committees, I got a couple BAs, but by the end of the day, I had working group meetings and the cold call meetings and, I just need to, what's the bill for this one? Or can you go talk to this member real quick? And that's it. And next, 4:30 comes and you're like, you know what, I got to stay a little longer. But because of that, someone is always willing to help. If your plate is too heavy, someone is always willing to step in to kind of give you a hand. And I think that's one of the best things about being on our staff in particular, is because we understand each other. We listen to each other, we talk to each other, we kind of build that bond. And so that's why most days aren't average unless everything is blowing up.
Well, great. I think that just to put a capstone on it, that's kind of our viewpoint and our perspective, but we'd be excited to hear the kinds of questions that you might have.
All right, and I think since we're a small enough group, I think you can go ahead and feel free to unmute and ask a question. But we did just get one in the chat. So is this based in Springfield, the positions?
Yeah, so I would say in the main and in principle, yes. And primarily that's a function of the fact that to do our staff work while during COVID, we've done it remotely, and I'm very, very proud of the staff. I think we're at our best when we're in interpersonal contact with members and the regulated community. So yes, we are based here in Springfield. There are some exceptions to that, but for the most part, it's a Springfield-based operation.
All right, and thank you, Ashley. She just also put in the chat, great presentation, and thank you. So other questions, again, if you'd like to type in the chat, that's fine, or you're also welcome to unmute and ask a question at this point.
Would one be able to still be doing their studies in school and also have this position?
So I will also ask Madeline and Jelani to speak to this. If I understand your correction or your question correctly, you were saying, would you be able to continue your studies while doing legislative work? I think number one, the ILSIP folks show us that yes, you can, because as they're going through the internship, my recollection and understanding is that they do have some coursework that they continue to work on while they're doing the internship. I have had several friends that during their tenure here went on to get an advanced degree. Not a law degree, we don't have that option yet, but an MA, a master's certainly. And I finished my master's while I was working up here, and I know of two people also. Madeline, Jelani, would you add anything there?
I would say, yeah, I think it's possible. I think a lot of our staff who have went and gotten a master's degree during their time on staff have definitely done an online or hybrid version, just because sometimes in the busier months, it's a bit hard to juggle being in person.
Yeah, how would they juggle finals, which come in May, with the heavy part of the legislative process?
Kristen, I can't quite make that out.
So I think the question was how would you juggle finals or kind of a heavier period as a student and balance that with your work responsibilities? Was that correct, Donna?
Yes, that's correct. I'm kind of worried about the month of May when things are trying to get.
Yeah, and I really think that's the difficult that Madeline is pointing to. Our primacy must be our responsibilities to the General Assembly, to the Office of the Speaker. So if you have competing interests, be that a second job that you need for your family situation, or you're taking courses, unfortunately, if there is a conflict, our primary responsibility is to take care of this office. But if you're communicating with your instructors on a case-by-case basis, I still believe that you could do it even if you had to lay out for a semester when we're January to May, and then re-engage with your work after session is over each year, if your goal isn't to finish very, very quickly.
We had a couple other questions pop up in the chat. So one person stating that they have a law degree but are not practicing currently as a lawyer. Would that be beneficial to these roles?
So I would say yes to that. I think Tech Review would be interested in taking a look at you as well. Would I have any qualms about it? Not a bit. I've thought for years that it might be very helpful for me to have somebody up on the floor that did have a legal background, that could consult on certain things where, things get very technical and we need to bring the legal staff in. So I wouldn't see it as a hindrance at all.
And we had another question come in through the chat asking, are you assigned committees or are you able to pick and choose which committee you are able to be in?
I'd like Jelani and Madeline to speak to this. I would say only as to tee it up. The assignments come from me in terms of the committee assignments. Some things drive that process in a very hands-on way, just circumstantial things. So for example, let's say that you used to work for the Heart Foundation. I'm just making things up. If I had a bill that involved the Heart Foundation, should I assign it to you? Probably not. Even the appearance of impropriety is not helpful. So even if I knew that you would keep a good firewall there, et cetera, I probably wouldn't assign the bill to you or assign you to a committee where you would have a lot of contact with them. But Madeline, Jelani, could you kind of fill that out for them?
So the committee assignments are typically, our director, Mark, he typically lays out what is needed and then has a conversation with all of the staffers, definitely those who are new, and asking them what their interests are from the available committees that we have. I'll just give you a personal story. When I first joined staff, Mark was ascending to become a director, and there was a need in higher education to have someone there to kind of oversee that as Mark moved on. And although I didn't necessarily have the biggest interest in higher education at the time, I saw the need and jumped forward. And I found that it was the most rewarding thing that I probably could have done, because it was something that I did not think I was interested in, and then learned how much I was interested in it later once I kind of got into the weeds. So there are times where people have been able to come in and say, hey, I'm really interested in environmental issues. And then Mark says, well, we have an opening environment on the environmental committee. It'd be great if you'd be there. And those things happen all the time. But then there's also times where it's in my type of situation. There's a need on staff. Someone has previously left, and now we need to fill that void. And so there's not much autonomy there, but it's still about the efforts of the team first and foremost, and then, of course, the wants of the staffers second when it comes to assignment of committees.
I have a question for you all. So one of the things, I know several skills were brought up throughout the presentation today. So having strong written and verbal communication skills, curiosity, kind of flexibility and adaptability to go with your day. Is there a skill that you've developed in your roles that kind of surprised you, or something you leaned on that maybe you didn't expect?
I would say that, coming straight from college and graduating, I was pretty lengthy. And when I was writing, and I just wanted to make sure I was including everything, even like small details. And in the grand scheme of things, that wasn't necessarily as important when it came to writing like a memo or a bill analysis, because we kind of keep it to, like, if you can keep something to 2 pages, that's pretty good. So it took me a while to like hone in my writing style, especially when it came to brevity, because I'm a pretty long-winded person. But that was something that I thought that I sharpened my skills on a lot.
I would say the ability to network. I think one thing that before I joined staff, although I had the ability to kind of go out and meet people, I think being able to truly utilize a network is something that takes a little more time to develop as a skill. And staff kind of threw me out there to do because it's just necessary. The ability to go out and meet people for a specific reason, deal with them on a particular topic, and then taking that, going somewhere else with it, developing it, growing it until you get your finished product. Those are the type of interpersonal skills that I had to develop very quickly in order to kind of make this thing work. And so that's what I enjoyed about it.
What I would add is in my former professional work, I was, I mentioned I was an instructor, but you only have about 30 or 50 students in your section. It's public, but it's not overly so. Here, if Jelani goes down to the floor, Madeline was talking about, floor work when we run bills on the floor. When you go down and do that and you're assisting that member, you're on television and you're probably being hot mic'd on NPR. And I've had a situation where I went home and on the radio program, I could hear some of the things that I was recommending to the member. Everything you do is very public, committee, floor work. And you have to be prepared to portray the most calm and rational optic possible, because really members are looking to you to help steward that discussion in a responsible, calm way, because there are often going to be really competing ideological frameworks behind that policy debate. And that's where staff's, our bread and butter really is at, bringing that that temperament of, calm to the situation and really looking at the facts unbiasedly. So because of the public nature of the work, I would say that I've really had to grow in how I work with people with whom I disagree, so that I sharpen that poker face and I'm not just, casting a disparaging look when somebody from the other side of the aisle has an idea.
Wonderful, really good insights. Any other final questions from the group? Either feel free to type in chat or to go ahead and unmute and ask your question. All right, well, hearing none, I think we can wrap up, but thank you all for being here today, sharing about your experience. It was certainly illuminating to learn more about the day-to-day and just the flexibility. And I certainly have more questions and I'd love to hear more stories, but again, want to give you back some of your time. So thank you all again. I think our presenters are open to questions if folks have questions after the fact. Is that right? You can email and reach out. All right, and of course, again, this is being recorded and it will be available on our Career Development Center YouTube page. So check that out. We will be posting some reminders and campus announcements and trying to put that out there too, but follow our Career Development Center social media channels and you can find this recording there. So thank you all for being here again and hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon.